Okay, I reckon we all get started now. Hi, everyone. I'm Alexandra. I'm one of the tutors at Fraser's GAMSAT. I'm also one of the mentors here at the company as well. So I tutor and I mentor students who are in our programs. Lovely to see so many people attending this webinar. So as you know, this is the 5 key things to know about getting started with GAMSAT Prep. And it's a difficult thing to get started with. Students always struggle with figuring out how to approach the GAMSAT, how to kind of tackle the challenges, the trials and tribulations. But at the end of the day, it is a very doable exam if you have the right technique and the right structure. So I'm going to share the slides now, and then we'll get into it. And if you have any questions intermittently throughout the presentation, please do pop those in the chat or the Q&A. And if you do want to pop them in the chat and you're feeling courageous enough that everybody else can see the questions, we highly recommend you guys do that. Just make it so that everybody can see. Okay. All right, so let's begin then. So, like I said, I'm Alexandra. I'm one of the Fraser's mentors and Section 1 tutors. And really my journey with the GAMSAT began, I would say, 4 or 5 years ago. I did biomed at Monash. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the course curriculum. I really enjoyed the whole process of doing biomed at Monash. And then I sat the GAMSAT 3 times during my studies. It just didn't really go with me. It didn't really click the first time around. I really struggled with understanding what to do, how to kind of approach the GAMSAT. I then decided, okay, I need to seek some support. So I actually did the Fraser's GAMSAT course. So it's called the comprehensive course. And after my 3rd attempt at the GAMSAT, that's the attempt that finally got me into med school. So I'm currently in my 3rd year of medicine at the University of Melbourne. So finished Monash Biomed, and I'm now studying medicine at the University of Melbourne. Sat the GAMSAT 3 times, as I said, really didn't click for me the first few times. So I understand what it's like to kind of be in the position where you're really unsure of how to approach it. So, like I said, MD3 at Uni Melb, also an S1 tutor and mentor. I also have a daughter, a fur daughter, and she keeps me busy while I'm at med school, or while I'm outside of med school, keeps me nice and active. It's Lily right there. She might pop up in the back of my Zoom, as she likes to do sometimes. Okay, so about the GAMSAT, it's a psychometric test. Okay, so what that means is it's not just a simple exam like one of your uni-based exams. It's assessing a completely different area of your understanding, your knowledge, and your cognition. It has nothing to do with your knowledge. It's all to do with, is this person logical? Are they able to think logically? And are they able to think clearly and concisely when presented with really challenging looking information? So fundamentally, the GAMSAT is a psychometric test which assesses the candidate across a range of diverse skill sets. You have an overall GAMSAT score, which is actually a combination of your Section 1, Section 2, and Section 3 scores. When it comes to the ability of the GAMSAT or the system to assess you, they really, depending on which university you apply to, it'll take a different GAMSAT score. Now, for those of you who are very new to the GAMSAT score that you get after sitting the exam, it's not like a percentage-based score. They're very secretive and elusive in the way that GAMSAT calculates their results that they give to students. And for those of you who are also very new to the GAMSAT, the governing body of the GAMSAT is called ACER, ACER, and they're the ones who calculate your GAMSAT scores. They read your essays, they mark your assessments, and they provide you a score at the end. And it's not a percentage score. It's purely a system of looking at all your marks distributions, looking at how everybody in the cohort did, putting that together and giving you a score. So it's extremely different to your uni-based assessments. A lot of the times when students begin practicing, and especially if they do a course with us and they get something like a 50-50 on one of their assessments, and it's like a freak out moment, because 50 in a university-based exam would be seen as pass, maybe just borderline. But that's actually around the average that students score, raw score, in terms of how they perform in any kind of given STEM. So that 50% that you score in a particular STEM in a practice might actually translate to a very high score overall, because that particular STEM or set of STEMs might actually be really challenging and other people might have done quite poorly in it. So I guess the big idea for everybody to understand is that this exam is a unique Very, very unique type of exam. It's not testing your knowledge. It's purely testing your logical thinking and your abilities to look at complex information. If you are a doctor and you have finished medical school and you're an intern and a new patient comes to you and they have this very, very rare condition and they're presenting to you with vomiting. It's okay. It's a very, very rare condition. You've never seen it before. You've never studied it. You've never heard of it, but you know a few important things. They've come to you with vomiting. The vomit is this color. The vomit looks like that. It's followed by this. 10 hours ago, this happened, X, Y, Z, and you're given all of that information. The GAMSAT or ACER, or even to be honest, the whole medical school system wants to see, is this student going to be the type that's freaking out, completely unsure of how to approach this, or will they be able to think critically and reason with the information that they're given, having never seen it before? I apologize, my dog in the background now. All right, so that's the GAMSAT. Now, let's get into top tips. As I said, the very first thing to remember is that this is a not a knowledge-based exam. It's a purely logic-based exam. So when you start your preparations, you need to really, really force yourself not to see it as another uni-based assessment. I reiterate this multiple times because over and over again, the number one problem I've seen in my 6 seasons of tutoring is that students approach the exam from a place of lack. I don't understand chemistry. I haven't done literature since high school. I don't have a degree in this. I haven't read a book since 2008. Like, it's always a place of lack. I don't know this. I'm not good at that. I haven't done enough. It's not about what you know or what you've done. It's about, are you able to think logically, clearly, and concisely? Similarly, to regurgitate this point even more, when you're given a physics STEM, you're not expected to know physics. If you have a bit of a background in physics because you have studied a bit of physics in your preparation, it will give you the confidence to locate the answers. It might not, in fact, very, very unlikely that that knowledge will be needed for the purposes of the question, because the answer will be probably somewhere in the STEM, in the diagram, or in the equation that you have to just put some maths together and figure out. So this is something I want you to always take with you over the next months of your preparation. And when you actually attempt the GAMSAT, whenever you're in a place of doubt, always go back to the fundamental principle. I know this is difficult, but it's logic-based, which means the answer has to be somewhere on that piece of paper. You might now ask me, okay, Alexandra, that makes sense for section 1 and for section 2, or for section 1 and 3. So just for those of you who are new to the GAMSAT completely, section 1 is the reading comprehension, section 3 is the science section, and section 2 is the essay section. So you might be thinking, okay, look, Alex, I understand logic for section 1 and section 3 for the reading and the sciences. Okay, I understand. But how can I possibly logic my way through an essay? And this is what I tell you. Start creating a skeleton for all of your essays. What this is a simple structure using simple ideas that you are going to be applying to every single essay. Have, for instance, 3 sub-themes that you want to write your essays through. These sub-themes should be broad enough that you can apply to any particular essay topic. Something that you're interested in. It could be something that you find really easy to write to, or it could be something in the social discourse that you particularly like to read about, or a news article, or whatever it might be. Start applying it to every single essay and start thinking about a 4-paragraph essay skeleton. It should be 4 paragraphs, 1 introduction, 2 body paragraphs, and a 4th paragraph, which is your conclusion. And start to apply it to any theme. If you go into the Fraser's website and you actually search up Fraser's section 2 theme generator, it will generate for you different themes. Start writing your essays, start planning them. And then by the time you get to the GAMSAT, you'll actually have a framework that all you'll have to do is copy and paste for that particular theme, with all the special components of that theme embedded into the essay. So it's also logic-based. We're not expecting that you go in there all guns a-blazing. I'm so smart, I know how to write a bunch of essays because I've read a bunch of books and read everything there is to know and watched every single podcast. That's not the expectation. Are you able to take a piece of information, being the theme that they give you, and put it into something that's logical and makes sense, and an essay that's interesting to read. That's it. Use what you already know. I've inserted a couple of screenshots here from dictionaries that kind of define the difference between knowledge and logic for us. So just remember, knowledge is understanding of or information about a subject that you get experience or study, either known by one person or by people generally. So it's understanding of or information. The GAMSAT does not require you to have understanding of or information about a subject. Hence, they don't expect you to have read every single lit prose there is to be able to do section 1. They don't expect you to have a PhD in chemistry to be able to do chemistry. Got a question here. Do they assess you based on grammar in section 2? They did not assess you on your grammar. As long as you're not making really mistakes that are really confusing. For instance, if you're giving the name of a particular place or giving the name of a particular person or giving the name of a particular concept and misspelling it, so it's a bit confusing. Otherwise, they don't assess you on grammar. They don't care about your grammar. They don't care about your spelling, because that's not the point of the GAMSAT. The point of the GAMSAT is to see if you're logical and you have ideas. So if you have some grammar there, that's not going to affect you. In terms of logic here now, logic is a particular way of thinking, especially one that is reasonable and based on good judgment. So this is what I want you to be remembering moving forward into the GAMSAT. It's not a knowledge-based exam. It's logic-based. All right. Keep posting the comments in the chat, please, and any questions you have. This is the perfect time for me to answer them. Okay, so from the ACER booklet, just to hone in on this point. So the test really is, the purpose of GAMSAT is to assess your ability to understand and analyze material, to think critically about issues, and in the case of the written communication section, to organize and express your thoughts in a logical and effective way. Please note, not a single word in this paragraph says you have to have an understanding and have a background and assess you. This exam assesses your knowledge of the sciences and your knowledge of the social sciences. Nowhere does it say that. So from this point onwards, whenever you approach the GAMSAT, please remember, okay, this is a logic-based exam. I'm going to start my preparation remembering it's about logic, not about knowledge. If you want to study some sciences, physics, bio, and chemistry for section 3, go ahead, but that should only encompass 10 to 15% of your preparation. 10 to 15%, and only for the purposes of building confidence. That is it. My personal opinion as a tutor here, my colleagues will agree with me, the ratio is 10 to 15% of the exam on section 3 especially. In section 1, it's 100% logic, no extraneous understandings or knowledge needed. For section 3, 10 to 15% knowledge, 85 to 90% logic. So if you do want to pick up a textbook, please be mindful of that. It's not about the knowledge. Right. Keep posting questions if you have any of them, guys. All right. So top tip number 2, start planning in advance. At Fraser's, we endorse the FAS approach. That's F, A, and S. F stands for fundamentals, so getting questions right. A stands for application, so keep on getting questions right and applying them. And S stands for simulation. I break this up into the months. So at the moment, it is still June. Soon it will be July. So my advice is, at the moment, from June to July, actually throughout July, you should be in the fundamentals, category. So that is, get yourself a resource of questions and start slowly going through the questions with a really logic-based mindset. Go through them slowly, microanalyze your thinking, try to understand why you're getting questions wrong. Slowly, untimed. The focus on fundamentals is on accuracy. Around July, around August is when you start to apply. So get yourself more questions and try to keep getting your questions right. Everything you'll learn in July in the fundamentals, try to apply that to more questions in August in the application. And finally, end August to mid-September, when the GAMI is, simulation. Try and get yourself a mock paper, a practice paper, and simulate doing the exam under exam conditions. And this should lead me well into my next point, which is reflection. So you need to have a mantra for yourself. There's two key things to remembering about the GAMSAT. Number one is the logic, which I told you about. And number two is the reflection. Here's a really good definition of reflection, I think encompasses this quite well. And it's a good definition because it's my definition, and all of my co-tutors really agree with me on this. So reflection is about remembering the thought processes that led to you getting the answer wrong. So what that means for us is that I've done a STEM on poetry. I then start to reflect on the STEM. Think, okay, why was the answer A, but I picked B? Okay, so why did I pick B? I remember I was thinking X, Y, Z, and that led to me picking B. On the opposite, I should have been thinking A, B, C, and that would have led to me getting A correct. So reflection is really the key to be doing in between your questions, because with that reflection, you will keep making those mistakes in your thinking. And remember, at the beginning, when we talked about the exam, we talked about cognition. It's a logic-based exam. It's assessing a particular way of thinking that is reasonable and based on good judgment. So if you're getting questions wrong in the GAMSAT, that means that your way of thinking is wrong, not based off of reason or good judgment. And you need to find and remember those thought processes which got you to picking the wrong answer, and think, how can I change this next time for it to be a correct thought process that is in the correct reasoning and that is with correct judgment? The only way to do this is to sit down after you finish the STEM and reflect on it. What was I thinking is your catchphrase. What was I thinking? What was I thinking when I read the STEM? What was I thinking when I read the questions? What was I thinking when I read the options? That's the best way you go about doing this. So that's my biggest piece of advice for reflection. It should be done after every single question and in a variety of means. Really, if you're ever in doubt, sit down, get the STEM up in front of you and try to think, okay, what exactly was I thinking at each step of this? And trust me, if you remember those incorrect thought processes, for one STEM, the results will be exponential. That will help you for multiple STEMs. At Phrases, we also endorse the 1-to-3 ratio, which means for every 1 minute you spend doing questions, you should spend 3 minutes reflecting, which means that a bulk of your learning should actually be reflection. Students do come to us and say, Alex, I feel like I spent like an hour on a STEM last night reflecting on it. Like, surely this isn't a good use of my time. Yes, it is a good use of your time. If you spent 1 hour reflecting on a single STEM, one STEM being, as text and a few questions following it, if you spend an hour, that means your brain needed that hour to comb through all those cobwebs that were causing you to make mistakes. That's good. Try and speed it up if you can, but otherwise, great. Most of us, I assume, will come from science or science-adjacent health backgrounds. That means that we're wired to love the numbers. We love it when we did 50 questions because that number looks good to us. So if we actually only do 2 to 3 or 5 STEMs in one day, that might not feel as good as doing 50 STEMs. But the big idea, again, is this is different to all of your other based assessments, your university-based assessments. If you've done 1 or 2 STEMs and really reflected on them, excellent. Job well done. You can go and relax now. As opposed to doing 50 questions without any reflection, having not learned anything about yourself, having just done the questions, repeating all those cognitive mistakes over and over again. There's no point. So really, really important. Reflection is going to be the change in your study approach. Extremely vital. We have the Fraser's reflection log online, and you can download it for section 1 and section 3 as well. It's an Excel spreadsheet. And what you do is you basically log every single question you've done, and it's like a means to reflect for yourselves. So you have the question number, the STEM type, the question type, the reasoning type, your answer, the correct answer, your evidence for picking the answer, and the correct evidence, what that correct evidence should have been. And also this column will say, should say like things that you need to work on in the future. The benefit of our the benefit of our Excel log is the fact that it actually creates graphs based off of the statistics. It creates the statistics for you so that you can see what question type, STEM type, and reasoning type you're really weak on. I started off my journey using this, and maybe I think I logged around 50 STEMs, 50 questions with a log, and then I created my own reflection sheet. I just had a piece of paper, and every time I would make a mistake, I would write down a key learning. The takeaways that you write in your log need to be something generalizable. So don't be writing things on your reflection sheet like, I got question 28 of this particular thing wrong because it said that Sally really loves Henry, but I actually picked the answer option that says Sally hates Henry. Because that's not going to help you in a STEM in the future. You want to be writing things down like, I need to remember and be more focused in my reading. I need to make sure that I always read this first. I always need to make sure that I don't underread the question. Things which are generalizable to any STEM type. That's what you want to be deriving from your reflection, reviewing, and then going on to the next question. If this is done correctly, I guarantee you, you will see improvement, especially we are repeat sitters. I know this, as I said at the beginning, I was a repeat sitter. First 2 times, had no idea what I was doing. Third time, really slowed down on the questions, bumped up the reflection time, and did really well. So reflection, I can't overstate it enough. It's really, really crucial. Top tip number 4, trust the process. This one's a difficult one. As a student, when I was studying for the GAMSAT, I really did not trust the process. I wanted results quickly and I wanted them now. The idea behind the GAMSAT is that gaining small skills consistently over time is better than crash studying where you try and learn it all in one go. As academics, people in science or science adjacent fields, we really, really don't know how to trust the process. We want it to happen quickly. I study this textbook. If I study this chapter, I'll know all about it by the end of it. That's not how the GAMSAT is. You have to let go and know that every single day, if I gain small skills consistently over time, I will get there in the end. A way that I kind of depict this is if, for instance, a score of 60 in GAMSAT section 1 is an okay score, but a score of 70 in section 1, and again, this is not percentages. GAMSAT doesn't use percentages. This is a system which they've calculated based off of your raw scores and the performance of everyone else. But in terms of the GAMSAT, a score of 70 in section 1 is phenomenal. So think about if every single week leading up to the exam, you gained skills to improve by 1 point. By the time we get to the exam, if you're already sitting at a 60, you could be a 70 by September, by the next 10 weeks, simply by gaining small skills consistently over time. So week by week, prioritize small, consistent efforts because those will accumulate over time. In my experience with section 2, for instance, I really didn't trust the process with this one. I went into the GAMSAT really in my preparation, really having written an essay since high school. I was in biomed 3rd year, hadn't written an essay since high school, didn't read much news or listen to many podcasts back then. I do now, but back then I didn't really do it. And I was really nervous about section 2. And my tutor, because again I did the course, I had a tutor, basically every week would say it's not about what you know or you don't know. It's about taking what you already understand about society and putting it together to write a good essay. Mm-hmm. So even if you don't necessarily have a lot of background knowledge of a particular topic, you are human. You have experiences. You've seen society. You've seen the way the world is. You might be able to actually pick up some of those things and use it in your essays. We all as humans, we've seen what happens in society. We know what injustices exist. We know what unfairnesses exist. We know what beautiful aspects of humanity exists. Use what you know and understand about society and write essays around those. We're not asking you to be experts in philosophy or economics. I remember when I started my section 2 journey out, I told my tutor, I said, look, I'm prepared to there's this course, Harvard is doing this mini course online on it's like a crash course on economics and like the market. And he was like, no, don't do that. And I'm like, no, I'm going to do that. I'm going to become an expert in economics. This is a free online course that Harvard is running. Why not? didn't end up getting past the first chapter. It's really not about knowledge. It's about you being a human, observing things that happen in society and writing convincing essays about that. So it's practice. But I didn't trust the process. I was always in a rush. This essay sucks. Oh my goodness me, how can I want to get to the next one. Oh, but I'm tired and I have uni to do and I don't want to write the next one. Get to the next one and I'm like, again, this is not as good as it could be. Yes, I've improved on my introduction, but I still have my 2 body paragraphs and my conclusion, which need help. Oh my goodness, constantly frazzled. Point is, got there in the end. I wish I just trusted the process and saved myself that stress. So this is a really important tip. This goes for section 1 and section 2. Trust that the process will get you there as long as you're making small but consistent efforts. And I also understand we have students from a variety of backgrounds. We've got students who work full-time. We've got students who work part-time. We've got students who are balancing having families with 3 kids and also people who don't have any kids. We've got people who are doing uni and balancing a family and doing this and that I'm doing for the GAMSAT. We've got a lot of different circumstances, but everybody gets into medicine eventually with small, consistent efforts. If you have commitments outside of the GAMSAT, spend 1 or 2 hours a day just working on this. Heck, spend half an hour working on this consistently. Half an hour every day for 7 days, that's 3.5 hours. 3.5 hours for however many weeks. You're going to make a lot of progress if it's small and consistent effort. So trust that the process will get you there. My top tip, finally, the final one, is to find the right resources. So I think this is a good opportunity for me to introduce our resources at Fraser's. So we actually have a free LMS that I will show you now. It's completely free. This is the LMS that students who are doing our course use, except it doesn't have everything on it. It has taste testers for everything on it. So I will show you this now. So if you create an account, so this is just Fraser's GAMSAT sign up. So if you can kind of just go to this link, Fraser's GAMSAT sign up. In fact, if you just go Fraser's GAMSAT sign up, it should take you to the first link. This one here, Fraser's Medical, ! This is the one, create an account. And basically it gets you access to the free LMS. So you've logged in, you've created an account, you've gone in here. We have got a lot of different things here. So we've got a section 3 atlas, a section 2 atlas, and a section 1 atlas. So the atlases are really important because they give you fundamental skills and questions that you can work on. And they give you all of the different, these are all of the skills that we've deconstructed for section 1, argument deconstruction, logical reasoning, contextual understanding, implicit meanings, conceptual relationships, and critical thinking. These are the 6 biggest skills that we have for section 1. And if you go into the chapter, you do have an introduction that is free. The rest of the levels are for our students in our course. And you have an introduction to section 1 with a couple of questions, but again, most of it is reserved for our students. But this is just giving you a taste test of how our atlas is built. We also have question banks, full question banks with hundreds of questions for each of the sections. These questions are made by students who've done the exam multiple times. So students meaning medical students who are tutors with Fraser's GAMSAT. So they're foolproof. Every single season, our students tell us these are like almost identical to. Actually, I lied. They're actually harder than the GAMSAT. Every single time our students finish the course being like, oh my goodness me, like I'm prepared for the worst. And then they get into the GAMSAT and they're like, oh, that was not as hard as I expected. So our questions are the same level or harder than the actual GAMSAT. We've got an academic timeline that you can look through just to see what kind of like how the courses are generally structured. We've got some extra tools and resources and a teaching philosophy as well. Just for those who are interested in terms of our courses and our package, if you go onto our website, we do cater to people with different economic backgrounds. So if you don't necessarily have the budget to be able to afford a full course, we do have smaller courses available, which are just as great. So in terms of, this is also something that I would recommend doing, actually, free GAMSAT Prep consults with any of our speakers and academics and mentors. I believe I am actually also on the system because I am a mentor. So if you just put in your full name and email and you sign up to this, you can actually choose someone to have a free 30-minute chat with. So I really recommend doing that if you are really unsure and you want one-to-one experience, one-to-one feedback rather. So we've got 3 packages. They start from $40 a week to $167 a week. So the simple package, the smallest package is the essentials. So this gives you a full question bank. And again, full question bank, meaning hundreds upon hundreds of questions for each section. And you can use these questions at your leisure to prepare for the GAMSAT, like I said, to reflect on, to make small improvements on, etc. With this course, you also get 1 full mock exam. You also get our skills-centric atlases. In my opinion, the skills-centric atlas is the most valuable thing for our students because that gives you those skills that I showed you, that breakdown of the skills, how to attempt them and how to do the questions. It gives you questions to assess you, to make sure you've understood how to tackle those particular questions. It also gives you the Section 3 Fundamentals Atlas, which is all of the knowledge you need to know. All of the knowledge you need to know for the GAMSAT is contained in our Section 3 Fundamentals Atlas, which means you don't need to go to any textbooks, watch any YouTube videos, anything like that. All of the knowledge you need to build your confidence is already contained in this course. And we have a couple of other bonuses for this package too. For our immersive package, this is our new course. It's the mid-tier range. It also provides you with the complete question bank. It's not written here, but it does provide you with a complete question bank. It provides you with 2 diagnostic mocks and 5 additional mocks as well, 12 mock review sessions, and a few extra things as well. So everything that the essential package, my apologies if you can hear my dog whining in the background. So it contains everything that the essentials does and then some. And the comprehensive is the full course. So this is the one where students attend in person or online to classes where we go through questions, we go through theory. It's live. Today I taught at the Melbourne headquarters. We had a class in the morning for one of the bridging courses for Section 1. So the comprehensive is like if you really want to be hands-on, but it is a time commitment because, for instance, for the next 4 weeks, my students are 6 hours in person. You can also do, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, my apologies, 10 hours in person for the next 4 weeks. And that'll be the same for the week after. So it's really, really hands-on. So if you have the time commitment, I highly recommend the comprehensive. Once again, it contains everything: complete question bank, mock exams, fundamentals atlas, skill-centric atlas. It also contains 22 private tutorials, which includes essay tutorials. You get paired with an essay tutor and you go through every week essays with them. And the 20 bridging classes, each of them 2 hours long, and the 24 PBL classes, each of them 2 hours long. So very hands-on. But that is basically our courses. If you choose not to do the Fraser's courses, that's perfectly fine, but we have to understand that we do have to put a little bit of coin into finding a good resource, whether it's Fraser's resources or another company's resources or the ACER resources that you get when you apply and book in for the GAMSAT. You really need to get yourself a good, solid bank of questions to reflect on and work through. That's the final piece of advice I have. So, in summary, across all 5 tips, number 1, logic-based exam. Please remember, it's all logic. It's not about knowledge, it's about your logic. Are you able to look at complex information and gain useful information from that to kind of report back to a superior, for instance, if we were interns, let's say. Number 2, the FAS approach. Fundamentals first, applications and simulation. Start off with getting fundamentals right. So get questions right, build your accuracy, build your skill, reflect, then start to apply those with more questions, then simulate with mock exams. Number 3, every single time you do a question, set the intention for yourself to reflect on it. I cannot tell you how many times I've asked my students to reflect and they're kind of like, yeah, I'll reflect. Yeah, I'll reflect. And then they don't reflect. So you have to set the intention to do your reflections. Otherwise, you will not change your thinking processes. Number 4, trust the process. Prioritize small, consistent efforts over time. And number 5, find the right resources, whether it be phrases or other. Excuse me. All right, questions time. Please pop in any questions about medical school, GAMSAT, or anything. This is your chance to ask me anything you might need. Let me have a look at the chat. Do they assess you based on grammar? Oh, that was the question I already answered. Des O'Neill also does not help with section 3 as it was easier than the GAMSAT. And personally, I found it useless in case anyone is wondering. I find that over the years, the style of GAMSAT has changed. It's become even more logic-based than it was a few years ago. So whereas a few years ago, you could get away with like understanding and having a bit of knowledge to support you, now all that knowledge really does is give you the confidence. It doesn't really help you as much with the questions because GAMSAT has gone really far away from knowledge. So the style of questions have really changed and phrases really adheres to that change in style. So yes, find a good resource. How much do you say a GPA matters for med school? Depends on the uni. At Uni Melb, we had to have a very high GPA. So I believe that for University of Melbourne, if you want to be confident of getting an interview, I would say aim for a 6.8 GPA and above. It's a little bit less for instance, Deakin, if we're in Victoria, and a little bit less for other unis interstate too. University of Sydney doesn't really care about your GPA much. They only really care about your GAMSAT and they don't even have an interview now. They actually just expect a really high GAMSAT. University of Queensland expects a high GAMSAT, high GPA, probably not as high as University of Melbourne, but still quite high. But again, it really depends on who you are, if you have any bonus points as well, if you have any experiences, if your GAMSAT's very high, and all of that. So, but University of Melbourne, basically every uni requires either a high interview, a high GAMSAT or a high GPA or both. University of Melbourne requires both. Other unis might be a little bit more lenient if you have a high GAMSAT. I have the essential package. Does this have the full question bank? Yes, the essentials package should have the full question bank. How do you approach section 3? It was so difficult in March and it was completely full of graphs that do not match Acer's papers. Acer's papers were so much easier. Does phrases do a comprehensive review? So actually, before I touch that, could you define high, please? High as in GPA. So a high GPA, in my opinion, a high GPA is 6.8 and above. And that's my opinion, though. Coming from University of Melbourne, that's my opinion. I've seen students with 6.5s, 6.4s, 6.3s, and 6.2s get into med school. I have a friend who got into med school with 5.9 because his GAMSAT was unreal. So it really depends. But yes, at Uni Melb, 6.8. 6.8. That being said, I do have people in my cohort who got in with 6.6s to University of Melbourne, but they might have had a really high GAMSAT and they might have had, for instance, rural advantage. If you've lived rurally, please explore if you are, if you get any bonus points for that. I've had friends who lived rurally for 5 years who were just on the borderline. And if they had applied with rural, they would have gotten 2% bonus for Deakin. So please, if you have rural points, please look into that. So just quickly back to how do you approach section 3? It was difficult. If it was full of graphs, which is what my S3 colleagues actually say that my friends who tutor S3, they actually said that there was a lot of statistics and graphs. Questions, jump on the questions now. Get the questions, start doing graphs, start reflecting. Okay, I got these 3 questions for the graphs questions wrong. Why? What's happening? What was my thought process? How did I attempt to tackle question 1? What was my approach? What was my approach like? At which point did I go wrong? Fix that thinking, try another diagram, try another one, regurgitate that and see if you improve. It's the only way, reflection and questions. Would it be worth to sit the GAMSAT early, like in your first year of study in bachelor's? I think every single attempt is definitely good. Expect to sit it at least 2 times. If you are brilliant, then you might sit it really well on the first time. I was not one of those people. I had to get help. Like I said, did the course, had to get help, but I got there in the end. Go ahead. I think the GAMSAT now, I believe someone can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, but It used to be that the GAMSAT was only applicable for 2 years. I believe it's now 4 years, but I would need to double check that. Does anyone know if that's correct? Is it applicable for 4 years now? It's 4, thank you. So it's 4 years. So if you're in your first year of a 3-year degree, go ahead and sit it. Absolutely. Jump right into it. Okay, I purchased the immersive course, but haven't been able to access my course. What can I do about this? Are you able to help? I'm able to help you, but I'm a tutor, so I'm not in the logistics space. I would say in that case, just email admin, okay? Admin@Phrases Medical. And this goes for anybody who's interested in any of our packages. The best email to write to is admin@phrasersmedical.com.au. Also, most likely I had this issue with one of my mentees the other day, and they just forgot to look in their LMS. So my advice is look in the LMS, and you should have access to everything that you need. The immersive is on, everything for the immersive is on the LMS. So just log into your LMS with your details, go into it and have a look. All the resources should be there. If there are any issues or you need some help, admin@phrasesmedical.com.au. Same for anybody else. If you have any questions about Frasers, our courses, anything like that, please email admin@phrasesmedical.com.au. Where was I? Okay. ANU, unfortunately, I'm not too sure, but I do believe ANU is quite competitive as well. When approaching section 2, how can we manage to create a mind map and write out an essay and complete the section on time? Practice and time management. My advice, 5 minutes planning, 10 minutes writing your introduction, 15 minutes writing the 2 body paragraphs and the conclusion. That's what works for me, because my belief is the introduction is the most important part of the essays. So I spend majority of my time writing it. Once I get to the end of my introduction, I've already got my argument. I already have my mental mind map. I just have to fill in the blanks by writing the next 2 paragraphs. Does anyone know what a 6.8 GPA is on a 4-point grading system? That is the $1 million question, and they are very elusive about that. I assume that maybe you're coming from Monash, because I know at Monash, mine was out of a 4.0 grading system, and I was very confused as to how they calculated it. But we have at Frasers GPA calculator. I will link this now in the chat. And actually, our system predicts the GAMSAT, it predicts your GPAs based off of your however many HDs and percentages you got. So here is the link for that. I recommend using it. Of course, it's not going to be 100% accurate, but I do recommend giving it a go. So that's just here. So put in all of your HDs and it calculates it for you. Breakdown for all the different unis. So if you, for instance, at a 4.0 system, just go into the link, put in all of your scores, and it'll calculate it for you for each of the unis. Should we start doing timed questions now? No. In the fundamentals, which is in July, do not do timed. It's all about accuracy. Building skills, trying to solve problems, reflecting, not about time. Timing begins in the application stage. In August, basically, is when you should start timing. If you only have a month to study, is 40 hours a week sufficient? Ooh, 40 hours a week is very adventurous. If you can swing it, do it. Ultimately, it just depends on how much you need to get done. The beauty of doing as a tutor, part of my role is to also promote our material. So I will say, if you're the benefit of doing a course, and especially as I was a student who did a course, I paid the money to be a student in the course. The benefit of doing a course is that we give you things to do. So you're not like kind of in this ether of there's unlimited things that I have to do and I don't know what to start off with. The benefit of doing a course, whether it's with us or another company, is that we give you prescribed things to do in a week. So you can allocate your time accordingly. Otherwise, if you're by yourself, give yourself a goal of how many questions you want to do in a week and reflect on and do that. And if it takes you 10 hours to do it as opposed to 100, fantastic. If it takes you 100 as opposed to 10, great. It's your journey. How many words would you recommend writing in section 2? It's not about words, it's about paragraphs. 4 paragraphs. Intro, body 1, body 2, conclusion. Do you know much about ANU medical entrance? I don't know much, but I do know a high-ish GAMSAT and a high-ish GPA. I did have a friend who got in, and I believe her GPA was 7 and her GAMSAT was like 67 or 68, but that was 2 years ago, so it could change. And again, people get in with lower scores. You don't have to be the highest of the high. Also, they have multiple rounds of applications. So one of my friends who got a GPA of 6.6, I believe. Okay, I can't remember their GPA, but I do remember their GAMSAT was around 69. I don't remember their GPA. Disclaimer, I don't remember their GPA. Oh, but they applied to University of Sydney, so it wouldn't matter anyway, because University of Sydney only looks at your GAMSAT. They only expect you have a 5.0 GPA, but they really expect a high GAMSAT. So my friend had in the 60s, which is low for Sydney. For University of Melbourne, high 60s, low 70s, fantastic, excellent. Mine was a 71, got in no problem. His was a high 60s, which is low for Sydney. But a week before med school started, somebody must have dropped out. He got an offer, and now he's studying at University of Sydney. So anything is possible. Please remember that. Anything is possible. And remember that it's not about if you get into med school, it's just about when. So it might not happen for you this year or next year, but eventually you will get in. Alex, would you say that a person with a 6.6 but a GAMSAT north of 75 or 80 has a solid chance of getting in, given they do well in the interview? I think absolutely. Oh, uni Melbourne. I believe I would not be against you applying. Let's put it that way. I would not be against you applying. If you were telling me maybe your GAMSAT was a little bit low, your GPA was a little bit lower, I might be like, apply anyway. The thing is, I never oppose people from applying. I think if your dream is University of Melbourne or Deakin or University of Queensland or University of Sydney or UWA, whatever, I never say don't apply. I always think apply because you never know what will happen. A GAMSAT north of 75 or 80 is absolutely phenomenal. So absolutely apply. And the chances are there. I'm not saying there's no chance. The chance is absolutely there. Can GAMSAT compensate? I believe so. It does depend year by year. I believe it can compensate to an extent. If we're going in the low GPAs, then maybe not as much. For Deakin, they do tend to be quite accommodating at Deakin. So I had a friend with, like I said before, with low 6s or high 5s. I believe it was 5.9, and extremely high GAMSAT in the 80s. And they got into Deakin a couple of years ago. But disclaimer, trends change, things change, medical schools change, people's performance changes. That might not be sufficient, for instance, next year to apply. It might be, but it might not be. Everything I say is with a grain of salt. It really depends on the cohort applying with you. There's no definitives. If I have a GPA of 6, what grade should I be aiming for to feel confident to apply to medical schools? As high as possible, as high as you can. Just really shoot for the moon. Try to get as high as you can. Notre Dame or certain unis, they tend to take lower GAMSATs because they're looking for a more well-rounded, holistic individual. Those are the universities which look more at your extracurricular activities, whether you're a good person, whether you've demonstrated community action and community work and all of those important holistic things. They tend to go for a little bit less of a GPA or a GAMSAT, but they now have aptitude tests of their own. So they've got the Casper as well. And the Casper is Casper Medicine. That would be CASP-ER. Have a look at this link and it will tell you all about the Casper. So this is for University of Melbourne. Sorry. This is for Notre Dame, Wollongong, and I believe a couple of others. So have a look at the Casper test. Which package would really help if I had the month to study and I need that structure so I know what to do every day? Had the month to study. So you do actually have 2.5 months before the GAMSAT begins. But if you really want a full-on course, comprehensive, the comprehensive package, I would recommend. But also if we have already started the comprehensive course, students are in the middle of their first phase now. If you want to maybe sit this exam and just see how you go and then get the full course of it summer, because the summer course is a little bit longer. Does working career get considered in med school? It does for Deakin. If you're, my apologies, I'm speaking from the state of Victoria, so I know all about Victoria. I'm not as familiar with interstate, but Deakin looks at your career. It does look, and it gives you bonus points. How much of a GAMSAT would you recommend of getting for the University of Sydney? As close to 80 as possible. They're really competitive with their GAMSATs. because they don't really care about your GPA. So one more question, does Fraser's Comprehensive help UK students as well? I believe this might be a better question for admin at frasersmedical.com.au, because they'll be able to better tell you. I mean, fundamentally, if you're studying the GAMI, you're studying the GAMI, whether it's in the UK or Australia, but it depends on, there are a few considerations given that you are overseas. So maybe do write to them and they'll be able to really help you out. The team is fantastic. Does the Essentials package have the week-by-week study plan for study, or is that just higher packages? To be honest, the Essentials package is, you don't get teaching. You get the question bank, the skills-centric atlas, the fundamentals atlas, and the mock exams, but you don't get teaching. So there's not necessarily week-by-week plan, but given that you have your resources, you've got your question bank, you've got your atlases, you can actually distribute the content in those atlases over the next few months. So it's kind of like you can create yourself a week-by-week plan because you have the materials and you can just go into them and have a look and see how many chapters there are and allocate accordingly. Do you know much about Flinders and Adelaide? I don't know much. All I know is that they do tend to preference their own students. And they do also have really high GAMSAT requirements. So in the mid-70s would be ideal for Flinders. When does the comprehensive GAMSAT course run for the March GAMSAT test? It starts in December. The comprehensive course starts in December. Bridging classes, so the 4 weeks of 20 hours, they begin in December. And then they run all the way to March. Oh, good. If I'm gaining experience at a medical clinic, how can I show that in my application? You don't show that in your application, you show that in your interview. Explain a time of challenge in your life. Well, a time of challenge was when I was working at the medical clinic, because it was all about me, interacting with patients and interacting with the doctors. And I definitely found it challenging and you slide in that experience in your interview. Getting an interview doesn't necessarily require you to show your experience, but getting the offer does. Terminology, if I apply into rural, does this mean I need to study rurally, work rurally once I've completed? No, that does not mean. You're not required to stay rurally. But if you apply for either the rural extended cohort or the bonded medical program, the rural extended cohort students, and I believe most unis now, don't quote me on that, a lot of unis now have a rural extended cohort. It's called REC program. So these are students who will train their whole medical school rurally. If you are part of the rural extended cohort, please have a Google of that, then you will be training rurally, regardless of if you are rural or not. But purely by being rural, it does not mean you are bound to stay rurally. Now, the other cohort of students are the bonded students. We're talking domestic students here. Domestic students, they have to work rurally for 3 years after graduating. So if you're a rural extended cohort student, you train in the rural extended cohort, so you train rurally, but the bonded students don't train rurally, or they don't have to train rurally. They can train metropolitan too, but they do have to work 3 years rurally, bound by government. Apologies for the tedious questions. No, please keep asking questions. Oh, also, if you guys think of any more questions, I forgot to give you my email. Did I give you my email? I'll give you it again. My email is alexandra@frasersmedical.com.au. It's my email if you have any questions afterwards too. Please keep asking us, guys. So apologies for the tedious question. So 6.8 is considered high on average, yes. And may I know what a low and average score GPA would be? That one I don't know. After that, I don't really know. Now, 6.8 is considered high on average, in my opinion, and for University of Melbourne, it's high, but somebody else might say 6.9 is high. Someone else might say 7.0 is high, and anything under that isn't high. But I think personally, high is 6.8, but that's my personal opinion based off of my experience. Low, I don't necessarily know. Average, I don't necessarily know either. My apologies. But if you want to get into med school, you will get into med school. You'll just have to find a particular med school that works. Also, is there a need to showcase our experiences on paper? Maybe if one of the unis requires a portfolio, yes. But for instance, Notre Dame last year got rid of portfolios. So now it's like the same as any other uni. If a particular university requires a portfolio, so have a look and see at the admission prerequisites for a particular uni. If they have a portfolio, then yes. Otherwise, no. And I did a lot of extracurricular activity when I was at Monash, and I was really upset when I realized that actually it's not going to be required for applying to University of Melbourne or Deakin, which were my first two preferences. But then I ended up mega putting those into my interview, like just really like showcasing those in my interview. Describe a moment of challenge. Describe a time when you worked in a group. Describe what your biggest strength is. You bring in your experiences there. So you don't need to justify experiences on the interview then. You do on the interview, yes, but not for most unis, no written kind of portfolio. But in the interviews, yes. And don't just be like, oh, I volunteered at a hospital for 1 year, which means I'm a good person, which means that's my strength. Or that was a time of challenge. You need to be like identifying one learning point from your experience and speak to that. So what's a moment of weakness, or what was a moment of difficulty? Well, when I was working in palliative care, I learned that the reality of medical, so I worked, when I was in Monash Biomed, I actually volunteered at a palliative care ward for a year and a half. So I spoke about that in my interview. So for instance, I don't remember the question I got, but let's say now I were to get a question about a challenge that you've experienced. I would absolutely mention my experience in palliative care and talk about how I learned a lot about what death and dying and grief meant. And now when I become a doctor, I'll be better able to understand and appreciate that medicine is not all about saving lives and bringing life into the world. Or for instance, if you're doing obs and gynae or peds, but it's also about helping people manage the idea of death and grief. And that is something that's so important for becoming a doctor. And that's something that my experience helped me to bring forward, which is what they want to see. In the interview, they want to see. You didn't just do a bunch of experiences to make yourself look good. They want to see, have you had experiences and have you learned things which will help you become a good, honest, genuine doctor? Yes, by stories and words and expressions. What are your tips and advice for you in a interview? Practice with others. Get yourself a resource bank. And there is phrases, do have an interview course. I did the interview course as well. Get yourself a resource bank of questions. Get yourself a small group of students to do questions with, and spend every night in the 2 weeks leading up to your interview practicing. Practice, practice, practice. You not only are able to practice verbalizing your own ideas, but you also practice by learning what mistakes other people have made in their questions. And you learn from that as well. Would you say it really matters where we get into med school? Absolutely does not matter. When was the last time we walked into a doctor's office and said, uh-oh, you graduated from this uni? No. I only see doctors from now on. Never. Once you're in med school, you're a doctor. You're on the path to becoming a doctor. Does Notre Dame prioritize GPA or GAMSAT? Both. There's neither of them is higher per se. What kind of extracurriculars do you recommend we do? I recommend you do extracurriculars that you know will help you become a better, well-rounded, honest, caring and thoughtful doctor. So working in the hospital environment, volunteering in the hospital environment, working with people in hospitality, working with people in academia, you're tutoring. These are fantastic experiences because they get you involved with other people and help you to learn about other people and their differences and how to navigate the terrain of complex personalities that you might be working with when you're a doctor and the people that you will be serving as a doctor. Because when you become a doctor, you become you serve humanity. So it's important to get experience with people. Any last minute questions from me? All good, guys. All good. Please email me if you need, okay? Just email me. It's my pleasure. My dog is here. She's just sleeping like a little angel. Always in my webinars. Thank you, John. Thank you. Wonderful, guys. Well, thank you so much. Please email me at any point. I'm always happy to help. Otherwise, I'll see you whenever I see you guys, okay? Take care, everyone. Bye, everyone.